Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday Tea Time. I actually made it on Tuesday this week. So I just looked. This is the 122nd episode. So we've been doing this for 122 weeks without fail. At some point, this will probably turn into an official podcast. But for now, I really like the casualness of it. I appreciate any of you guys that join me on Tuesdays, and I appreciate all of you guys that watch at other times also. So today, I wanted to chat a little bit about idealism and about this desire that all of us have to be idealistic. My mom's horse Rom is with me today for tea time. The stallions are up on the hill hanging out together. And for those of you who are in my Patreon group, I posted a really beautiful video of riding Rom out in the marshes, in the flooded pastures. And it was pretty idyllic. It was pretty beautiful. Hi, Sal. Welcome to tea time. And, you know, in that video that I had with Rom, where I was wading around the marshes and splashing in the water, looked so idyllic, so beautiful and free, and I loved sharing it. But then, you know, one of the comments that I got from a student was, what about all of us that live closer to cities that don't have that kind of freedom, that don't have those kind of wide open spaces? And you know, the thing that came to mind is the fact that our freedom is always going to be limited by the community we live in. Because when you live in community, everybody's freedom matters. And one person's freedom is likely to limit another person's freedom. So, you know, if I make a choice that's really good for me, it may impact somebody else in my community in a negative way. And, you know, that's just the nature of living in community. I did keep my horses closer to the city for a number of years, and it looked a lot different. You know, they weren't able to make as many choices. I did have to direct them more because there were a lot of things that horses couldn't do in that neighborhood that they might want to do. I might want to let them do, but my neighbors wouldn't necessarily approve. And, you know, I want to point out that this isn't this complex idea that we want to give our horses freedom, but it's not always possible. This is not limited to you guys. So, you know, Ram is here. He would much rather be living with his mares. But our pastures have flooded so much, I can only come up with one pasture that's dry enough for the horses to be on. And Ram and Ocasio fight so much that Ram jumps out of the pastures. And so I can't keep this big guy in a pasture if he has to live with Ocasio, who he thinks is just rude beyond belief. So if Ocasio is free to make all the choices he wants to make, Ram then makes the choices to exit by jumping the fences. So given that I only had one pasture that was dry enough, Ram had to come up here and live with my stallions who are up on the hill. And the gates are open. They're in together. But, well, the gates close between Ari and Atlas right now because I'm busy with you guys. Ari and Atlas only get to be together when I have my attention on them. But there's another example. Okay, so the things that my stallion Ari thinks he should be free to do are unacceptable to Atlas. And if I just open all the gates and let them live together, Ari does things that make Atlas so angry that Atlas then causes huge bodily harm to Ari. And so I have to, you'll see in my pastures, there's a great big fence running down the middle. I'd rather not have it there. You know, the idealist in me would like to have that whole pasture open. But I can't because I have two stallions. and I have two stallions that have not learned to get along yet. Does that mean they'll never learn? I actually don't know the answer to that question. Maybe. But I guess that leads me right to my point, which is we all look at something, we look at a video, we look at a story, we read a book, we read an article, and we think, oh, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice if I had that? And then we think about all the reality of our situation, and we have to think, well, I don't have that, but how do I make the best of the situation I do have? And so I think that we need to start looking at freedom for our horses within the range of what is reasonable in our particular situation. So where I run into this a lot is people will say, I really want to wait for my horse to offer things, but my horse is too fat and will get sick if it eats too much, and therefore I have to keep stopping it from eating. There's no way that you're going to be able to wait until the horse has that zen ease about eating before they kill themselves eating too much. That's just the reality of the situation for some horses. I had it with one of my horses. She had an allergic reaction to Clover a couple years ago, and I had to lock her in a paddock and feed her very special things. There was nothing free about that situation. But within the realm of her eating too much Clover and getting sick, I had to pull her off all the green grass for a while as per the vet's instructions, feed her something very different, give her a chance to recover. She is out on grass now again, but I have to be very careful I don't put her in pastures that have too much Clover because she has a sensitivity to it. It means she's a little frustrated. She would love to go in the pastures with all the Clover where the other horses can go, but she can't. And that is when we have to limit freedom. So I got another, comment today, do we have to give up riding and galloping and jumping and all the things that we really love to do with horses? No, we don't. But we do need to accept that in the time frame we have to spend, there might be dominance involved in that. I think there's a lot of really brilliant dominant trainers out there in the world helping us learn how to be fair and clear and do dominant training in a way that considers the horse's perspective and makes their life fun and interesting and healthy at the end of the day. What I'm offering from the freedom side of things has to only fit in within the realm of what's safe, okay? If you can set up an environment where your horse is going to be healthy enough, if you can set up an environment where they are going to be reasonably comfortable making all their own choices, then to that degree, you can play with the stuff that really interests me, which is if I spend enough time with them, timing my responses to them appropriately, then over time, do we get to the point where they want to take me for a ride, where they want to explore things for me, where they want to jump a jump with me, where they want to gallop up a hill with me. This is a sort of idealism that I have going, and I have had to trade for it. I've had to trade time, okay? So Ram here, he's pretty well trained. He'll take me for a gallop up a hill. As long as I use just a little bit of dominance to get him pointed in the right direction, he's happy to take me for a gallop up the hill anywhere. My stallions up there on the hill, they're not so well trained. And I've decided I have traded this idea of loving to ride and gallop and jump and all those things. I have put that into the future because I'm more interested in what happens if I train in freedom. I just like the experiment. And I have a reasonable enough situation where they're healthy enough, they're happy enough, and they are free to a degree. And I feel comfortable working with them with very little dominance and mostly waiting for what they offer, because it's more interesting to me than the galloping and the riding and the jumping. And I realize I have a pretty ideal situation here because, Ram, my good friend here, is happy to do all those things with me with a very, very minimal amount of dominance. He's in his 20s. He's had a long and varied life, and he knows what he enjoys. And it's not entirely freedom-based the way he's accustomed to working with humans, so I can't expect that from him. But there's a lot of freedom in our work together. And, we've made a compromise. The idealism in me says I should never ride Ram until he volunteers. But the realist in me says, maybe Ram really likes getting out of the paddock and going to explore sometimes. And maybe that little bit of dominance that he needs to make the right turn or the left turn in order to feel good carrying me around is absolutely justified as a means to an end that makes his life good. So I guess, the point that I want to make is that I'm not against dominance. I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's wrong. I think there's a lot of good trainers who use dominance beautifully. To me, dominance is any time you have to use a tool to manage the potential of fight, flight, or freeze. Fight is when the horse pushes against you in a way that makes you feel threatened. Flight is when they try and get away from you. And freeze is when they just ignore you. And, if you're having trouble with fight, flight, or freeze in the activity you want to do, then you're going to have to use some dominance to get through to the other side of it so you can enjoy their company with think and yield and play and all the good stuff. Now, if you're like me and you want to do an experimental thing, you think, well, what's possible if I never put myself in a situation where fight, flight, or freeze might come up? Now, the reality is freeze is going to come up. There's nothing wrong with that. It just means you have to be patient. But it is entirely possible to train without fight or flight, without the horse trying to push into you or run away from you. And that's the thing I like to experiment with. What I find is that all of my students will be able to also experiment with that in some part of their life with their horses. And it makes their relationships better, and their horses like them better, and everything goes better. But it may not be as much of your life as you want it to be, because you live in a community where your horse can't make that many choices safely all the time. And that's just the reality. Ram here really wishes he could go live with his mares, but he lives in a community with too many boy horses that all want to live with the mares. And so at my house, they have to take turns. So Ram's here for a couple of weeks, and then I'll switch him around. He can go live with the mares, and Ocasio will come live up here. I shape it to be as ideal as I can, but the reality is the reality. We have to keep everybody safe. We have to keep everybody healthy. And then we can work with freedom within that range of safe and healthy. So those are my thoughts today. I hope that's good food for thought for all of you, and have a wonderful week, and I will see you next Tuesday.